The Middle East stands today at a critical juncture. With continued Houthi attacks against civilians in Israel and in the Red Sea, Syria's precarious position following the fall of the brutal Assad regime, the ongoing firing of rockets by Hamas, again just yesterday at Be'eri, where Israeli civilians were massacred on the 7th of October 2023, and 100 hostages still being held captive by Hamas terrorists. The presidency called for an emergency session today, not to deal with these threats and challenges, and not to condemn terrorists blatantly violating international law by exploiting hospitals as their bases of military activity. Such actions negatively impact the credibility of the Council and the international system. Hospitals are meant to be sanctuaries of care and compassion. Yet Hamas has transformed them into tools for terror, exploiting their sanctity to shield its murderous aims and wage war against civilians. This is not an isolated tactic or an act of desperation. This is a deliberate and systematic strategy, a cornerstone of Hamas's operational doctrine, their modus operandi. Though we have known this for many years, the past 15 months have exposed the depth of Hamas's depravity. In November 2023, IDF troops exposed a 55-meter-long terror tunnel, 10 meters deep underneath the Shifa hospital complex, along with massive caches of weapons throughout the tunnel and the hospital. In that same month, at the Indonesian hospital, IDF forces identified a white Toyota truck used during the massacre of October 7th, located within the hospital compound. Additionally, a vehicle with an Israeli license plate and bloodstains, later linked to a hostage, was found in the hospital area. In February 2024, the IDF uncovered a network of terror tunnels connecting the Turkish hospital in Gaza City to nearby operational facilities. These tunnels allowed Hamas operatives to move weapons and personnel discreetly, all the while exposing and exploiting the civilian infrastructure of the hospital. In March 2024, the IDF revealed dozens of weapons, millions of dollars in blood money, and hundreds of operatives once again inside Shifa Hospital. We found further video footage proving that Hamas took hostages to Al-Shifa following the October 7th attack, and that the hostage Noah Marciano was murdered by a Hamas terrorist within the hospital walls. Just 4 days ago, on December 30th, Hamas operatives were caught on camera planting explosives a mere 45 meters from the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza. And now, Kamal Adwan Hospital has become the latest site exploited by Hamas, a grim addition to their well-documented and public history of abusing civilian infrastructure. This council must confront this undeniable reality. Hamas does not respect the sanctity of hospitals, schools, or places of worship. It uses them to protect its terrorists, store its weapons, and launch its attacks. It uses civilian population as human shields, playing on the instinct to protect the vulnerable. At Kamal Adwan Hospital, Hamas turned a facility for healing into a command center for terror. Since October 2024, following an IDF operation in the area, Hamas entrenched itself in the hospital, embedding its military infrastructure and operational hubs within its walls. Despite repeated calls by Israel to cease the unlawful military use of the hospital since the start of the operation in October, these warnings were again ignored and disregarded. This week's precise operation by the IDF revealed the extent of Hamas's abuse of the facility. Over 240 terrorists were apprehended, including 15 who participated in the October 7th massacre, the darkest day in Israel's modern history, where over 1,200 lives were brutally taken by the terrorists. Among those apprehended was the hospital director himself, who is suspected of being a Hamas operative, as hundreds of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists were hiding inside the Kamal Adwan Hospital under his management. He is currently being investigated by Israeli security forces. Colleagues, this operation was not a choice. It was a necessity. It was conducted based on extensive intelligence gathered over months, confirming Hamas's activities on hospital premises. In accordance with international humanitarian law, the IDF has implemented comprehensive measures to mitigate harm to civilians. Prior to this operation, Israel facilitated the evacuation of 350 patients, caregivers, and medical staff from the hospital, along with the delivery of tens of thousands of liters of fuel, hundreds of food parcels, and critical medical supplies to sustain hospital operations. As the operation progressed, an additional 95 patients, staff, and caregivers were safely transferred to the Indonesian hospital. This included the provision of 5,000 liters of fuel, 2 generators, and essential medical equipment to maintain the critical systems and ensure uninterrupted care. Israel continues to cooperate with the international community to strengthen the medical response capabilities at the Indonesian hospital. Additionally, the IDF worked with the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital to ensure the facility was vacated from patients and other civilians prior to the commencement of its precise operation. The operation uncovered caches of weapons, including grenades, firearms, ammunition, and other military equipment hidden within the hospital grounds. As IDF forces operated nearby, they faced attacks from Hamas operatives firing anti-tank missiles and RPGs. This is the stark contrast between Israel and Hamas. While Hamas endangers civilians, Israel protects them, even at the risk of our own personnel's lives. Hamas's exploitation of hospitals is not only a moral abomination, but a blatant violation of international law, and far too often, the international response has been silence. On October 17, 2023, when an explosion rocked Al Ali Hospital, many in this chamber and around the world rushed to pass judgment, parroting casualty figures provided by Hamas terrorists. Those numbers were grossly inflated, and the explosion was caused not by Israel, but by a misfired Islamic Jihad rocket. Yet the damage was done. Hamas's propaganda had achieved its goal. This Council cannot afford to repeat those mistakes. It must not allow itself to be manipulated by those who weaponize the truth. It must maintain its dignity and credibility. Israel's actions exemplify its commitment to international humanitarian law and principles. Despite the challenges of protecting itself against an enemy that hides behind civilians, Israel continues to uphold its obligations. Over the past month alone, Israel has facilitated the medical evacuation of over 1,000 patients and caregivers from Gaza for life-saving treatments in 13 countries. These efforts reflect a fundamental truth. Even as it faces relentless terror, Israel remains committed to preserving life. Distinguished Council members, this short hand extends beyond Israel and Hamas. It strikes at the heart of international norms and the principles that govern this Council. If hospitals can be turned into terror bases without consequences, if civilians can be used as shields with impunity, what does that say about the state of international law? What message does this send to other terror groups around the world? This is a test, not just for Israel, but for the Council and for the global community. Will we stand by as the sanctity of medical institutions is eroded? Will we allow Hamas to set a precedent where the protection of civilians becomes a shield for terror? This Council must act decisively. It must condemn Hamas's actions in the strongest terms. It must recognize that Israel's operations are not only a response to terror, but offense to the principles that underpin this institution. Israel will continue to protect its citizens, uphold its commitments under international law, and do all it can to bring the hostages home. But the Council must meet its own obligations. It must protect the innocent, fight for the release of the hostages alongside us, uphold the rule of law, and hold accountable those who seek to weaponize human suffering and civilian infrastructure. I thank you.